If you're looking for a journey into feelings both dark and demure, today's guest offers a somber sonic landscape where listening seems like trespassing, but the secrets of Blue Vow are too good to stay unknown. Chelsea, if you had permission to sneak a peek at anyone's personal journal, whose would it be?
Wow. Firstly, I'd like to thank you for such a heartwarming introduction. Wow, I feel very humbled, and it does definitely add to the air of excitement. Um, Sneak at someone's personal journal. There are names that came to mind, and I'm more than happy to mention them. But the truth is, I don't think I could actually read it. I'd probably get the book, look at the front cover, my hands would start shaking, and it would just be like, I got to put it down, unless I had full consent to read.
Do you keep something like a journal or maybe a book for like lyric scribbles, things like that?
I have, so I've got a book that I try and maintain the habit of writing in every morning, which I guess is a bit of setting intentions for the day. Also a dream journal. If dreams come up, I do write about them, as they are a portal to, yeah, I guess to a lot of emotions or worlds that sometimes do infiltrate the music I write. Regarding lyrics, they're kind of all over the place. A lot of the time, just having a phone helps. If something comes up and I don't have a book on me, then I'll just type it in a note. Um, yeah, and I have had journals that I take, like a little one that I take when I travel, that I trifle up with. But I sort of just write wherever I can, even if there's a tiny piece of paper next to me. But then it gets a bit difficult to keep up with. But I find that when it comes to actual lyrics, they usually come out with the song. They're sort of, I guess, sparked by the instruments themselves, whether that's a guitar drone and whatever frequency that's being played in, or whether it's a tiny little acoustic rhythm that I'm picking on a guitar if I'm playing with an acoustic guitar. So the lyrics within the music sort of generally seem to unfold as the whole song is unfolding. A lot of the time where I've written lyrics or a poem or something, say I'm out of the house or I'm walking or I don't actually have any of my instruments with me, I find it quite challenging to then insert them into the music. But every now and then, like maybe a line or something sparks an idea that infiltrates a song that I'm working on. But it usually has to change depending on the nature of the instrumentation and the way that that song is feeling. If that makes sense? Yeah.
It does. Considering you sort of write to an already laid instrumental, from what I'm understanding, do you prioritize the phonetic quality of your lyrics or your words, or more the semantic preference? Because they're very interesting lyrics. They're beautiful.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. It's once again very heartwarming and humbling to hear. And thank you for listening, and specifically taking note of that. I think for me, the lyrical meaning is incredibly important, and is a huge part of the songs, especially as I definitely, I feel so silly saying this, but I am a bit of an amateur instrumentalist. I didn't study music, and I still have much to learn. I don't know any of the theoretical side of what I've been making. And that's definitely a world that I want to lean more into. I have had very basic lessons, but yeah, I think because of that nature, the lyrics do carry a huge weight and inform a lot of what the song holds, if that makes sense. And yeah, the meaning is very. Every now and then a line pops up that is just sort of very intuitively written, and sometimes I question it, and other times I try not lean into the meaning too much. But if I think about the first album, I can not necessarily explain every single line, but I'm very aware of my intentions behind essentially every word that was used. So I do put a lot of intention and energy and thought into the lyrical process. But within that, I try not let my head get in the way. I definitely allow a sort of intuitive way of writing to come out, because sometimes a line evokes a feeling and I'm like, okay, that's it, even if the line itself may not be literal or make too much sense.
How much thought and preparation goes into your social media as well? I mean, do you put in as much effort into that as you do the music? And how are you sort of finding it, sort of having to do both if you are the one that's running, obviously, your Instagram, for example? Would you say it's a challenge at all, having to, worry about what do I have to post next, while also having to write the next song and such?
That's actually such a good question. I mean, all of these questions are so wonderful and they're very thought-provoking. So I'd like to thank you guys for that. But specifically in this day and age, I have a lot of work to do when it comes to the social media aspect. I find that it's a space that I'm still navigating, specifically with the Blue Vow page. I'm definitely not active on it as much as perhaps I could be, or should be, depending on how one views the space. I do see it as a very useful tool when it comes to art in general. But I find, yeah, I do definitely find myself conscious of it and, aware of like, okay, it's probably time to post something. And I do think about it, but I guess I also like to be quite intentional with the way it's used. I don't just want to post for the sake of posting. I'd like to have content that feels honest. I think that's the most important thing, is to create a space that, of course, has its boundaries in a sense of not just sharing absolutely everything. But I think integrity and honesty is a big part of it for me. And that's regarding any work. I mean, I definitely put in far more vulnerability and hours and intention into the music itself and the art itself, because that for me is the most important work, and because I'm still learning how to essentially market myself, and I haven't put in a lot of reading time and learning into how one should do that or could do that. So for now it's quite organic, and if I have a reason to post, I will, but I do would like to get a bit better at it, especially as I want to get my the work out there and share and create a space that is also community based in a way, and open and vulnerable, but not vulnerable, but within a space that feels safe.
That makes a lot of sense, and I feel like you're doing such a brilliant job, because on the Blue Val Instagram, you got a very consistent theme. Very much of that black and white is in there, and I feel like you can actually see that this is sort of run by the same person. It's not like all over the place and such. So I feel like it's something that you're pulling off quite well. And in one of the posts as well, I saw. It's a post that you put up on the 3rd of Feb, where you mention that, the first line in the caption is, "Tonight will be held and warmed by a full moon in Leo." Are you into like astrology and star signs and stuff?
Yes, I am. It's also a world that I've always kind of been very intrigued by, but I'd say in the last maybe 2 or so years, I've just opened up the door a little more. I'm always going to, I guess with any kind of door that I open up myself to, there's always going to be a bit of, I take it very slow and I'm wary, and I make sure to not necessarily go into a narrow space. I like to, get lots of different opinions and ways of being and seeing in order to inform my own, what feels right for me. But I think it is fascinating. And there's a few astrologers that I've follow online, and the way I see it is whatever's happening out there astrologically is sort of a big mirror for, or can be viewed as a mirror for, what is happening on the earth, whether that's just within our own internal world or whether that's the collective as a whole. I definitely don't think reading like everyday little star sign in like a, I don't know, Cosmopolitan magazine is, I'm not at all speaking about that, but I think that there is a depth to it that I've just become a bit more aware of, and it's just opened up my eyes and mind to a lot. So it's become a world that I'm definitely exploring and feeling connected to. I guess we'll see where it goes. I'm very interested in actually learning more and studying at some point, because it almost just feels like a bit of a hand to hold. And it's interesting. I find it really interesting to see, like, or to read about when a certain planetary alignment is happening, or, when astrologers and people who really study this and sort of speak about what it means. I then look at that and kind of, once again, as I said, it being a mirror, I look at my own personal life and what's going on internally. And I also look at what's going on with those around me who've also shared, maybe what they're moving through. And it's just very interesting to see the connections there. So I see it as a spiritual practice, ultimately.
It's very beautiful. Does it have any bearing on the music that you make, or would you say it's sort of just starts and stops at Chelsea, just, the human being? Would you say it has any impact, or, sort of seeps into the music that you make as well?
Do you mean astrology specifically, or just my
Yeah.
spiritual practice?
Astrology, all of it actually, the astrology and the spiritual practice.
I guess they're all connected. I mean, I do see them as connected. So absolutely, for me, art making is quite a spiritual practice, and not in any way making it inaccessible, because I'm still human. I'm in an earthly body. I'm living here. So there's a way of just I kind of see what I'm making as a bit of a conduit, like these, I don't know, songs, words, music. I'm just a body that's sort of translating it. And obviously through my own lens and my own experience. And it is a very honest, at the moment, I can only make what I know to be true. And as I've been doing a lot of work to unpack my own inner world and reflect on the outside world that I find myself in, that's what I can write about. I haven't yet found the space to be able to essentially write about things that I am sort of just observing. So yeah, I would say it definitely does influence. It is all connected, 100%. But never ever sometimes from a space of curiosity and observing. But I wouldn't want to write or make art about something that doesn't feel like I can speak about it, if that makes sense.
It definitely makes a lot of sense. Well said, Chelsea. Thank you for that.
Thank you for the questions.
You've said that Blue Vow started as a spilled feeling. What made you realize that it could be something more?
Well, in 20, I actually, we could take this way back to when I was very small. Music was always something I wanted to do. It was very much the childhood dream, but that very much got squished along the way, as a lot of, I think, childhood and purity and the world can definitely, or family life, whatever one's context is, but it can definitely take you away from yourself and from that pure space. And so it technically started there, absolutely disappeared, but I never lost interest in. I was always listening and fascinated and connected to music, but never really saw the possibility of me creating. If anything, it would always just be conversations with friends like, yeah, man, we should start a band and it would be really cool. But I found it very difficult to actually take the steps, or maybe find belief in myself to be able to do that. And then in 2020, I know lockdown came with an immense amount of essentially trauma, but I was in a very privileged space, and I had a lot of time to, I was in a safe space, and I fortunately moved out of my home during that time, which allowed me to really just be with myself, without the I guess family home. And I spent a lot of time watching music documentaries. Like, I have an archive that I would love to share with so many people, because I think that was definitely a huge catalyst, seeing these people that I look up to and, either didn't know about or learned about or have always loved. But I think that there was so much within them and their lives that kind of made me just so excited, and also saw possibility within myself to do that. But on top of that, I also mid 2019, I started really delving into my own healing, seeing a holistic, and I'm seeing a holistic psychologist. It's a slightly different form of therapy compared to the norm. That for me was one of the biggest shifts, as well as transcendental meditation. Basically, just a lot of inner work and healing and sifting through trauma and sifting through blocks and going into them, but essentially allowing myself to reconnect to bits of myself that I had essentially disassociated from. And I think that's when it became possible. I had the time and the space. I was alone. I was eating everything musical that I could. And I was privileged enough to have the time and space to pick up a guitar and, literally get a little interface and a tiny microphone and plug into GarageBand and just play. And I am incredibly grateful for that. But yeah, it was basically an amalgamation of everything that allowed for it to feel possible, because it definitely didn't from the beginning. And even listening to artists that, weren't necessarily trained or had the teaching, but that were still making music, I think that was something that was so beautiful, is still so beautiful and so important, because it becomes more about just playing and feeling and experimenting, and less about having access to an education around it, which I think is very empowering, and kind of gives permission to anyone to play or do anything that they feel connected to.
More of a comment on my end, just for me to follow up. But as much as you're thanking us for the questions, thank you for just answering these so wholeheartedly and just going in depth. Highly appreciate it.
It really is an absolute pleasure. I think it's important, and I don't know if I'd know how else to answer. But I appreciate that, and thank you for appreciating and listening, and really listening.
So what's stopping you from sharing that archive of music documentaries? Because you shared a playlist of songs that are, inspiring for Sunfall. So this could be another installment.
Absolutely. And to answer your question, I'm like, nothing but myself is stopping me. It's one of those things where I was like, once again, grappling with social media. I'm like, how do I want to use this page? Because there's parts of me, for instance, looking at Patti Smith's Instagram, it's like this beautiful journal and unfolding of all these very intimate things in her life. But then, you get other people who maybe have more of an image and a bit of a mask that they portray, rather than the more personal things. And I think I'm still trying to find that balance, because there's a part of me that's like, I want to share all the documentaries and the films and the podcasts and the meditations. And I think I will get there. I guess I'm just a little bit shy at the moment. But something like documentaries is nothing to be shy about, actually. So I will do it. I'm going to do it, especially after listening to this. I think it's vital. And what it gave me, if I could pass that on and I could give that to someone else, I think it would be very beautiful. And I almost see it as a responsibility. If you have access to certain, information or books or films, and you're able to pass that on, I think it's a very beautiful responsibility to have to share that with others around you. So I have no reason to not be doing it.
I think this is the perfect opportunity for us to actually start. Perhaps you can give us, the top 3 documentaries that people should check out right now.
Ooh, that's a good one. Okay. So specifically music related, I think I'll go there. Okay. So one that I watched, I'm just trying to go back. So I'm kind of delving back into 2020. But one that I watched that I really loved was called Punk Attitude. It's sort of about specifically in New York, the history of punk music there. Another one that I watched that was very influential was also a band called Death. I would say like the sort of slogan for that film is like punk before there was punk. And it's basically, a band, and because of the politics in America, they didn't become known as they were men of color, and it was obviously very racist and gnarly time back then. And yeah, their story is so beautiful, very tragic, but also very beautiful, and it's very much cloaked in quite almost like a prophetic It's got a very prophetic air about it. But I'd say that one was also really important. And Rumble. There's this very phenomenal film called Rumble, which sort of goes into the history of pre-blues, which is essentially the Native American influence on blues music. And obviously blues then led into pretty much everything we have today, into like, rock and roll. But Rumble's beautiful. It starts with, as I said, Native American music into blues, and it literally delves into then rock and roll and even hip hop, and it really spans throughout the times. And what else? Oh, That Punk Singer was an incredible documentary about Kathleen Hanna, which really delves into, I would say, a sort of feminist approach with music. And I think for female assigned bodies, that film is incredibly powerful. And another, so I know I'm mentioning more than 3 now, but there's one more that also comes to mind. Sisters with Transistors is really beautiful too. It's all about the female assigned bodies that essentially were the soil in which electronic music today has become. I don't know, like how we have electronic music now. They sort of created all these transistors and drones, and it's kind of like the forefathers of electronic music, but not necessarily only focusing on men. I mean, a lot of these films is of course ways to critique them. Like I would love to see more like people of color involved or queer people, but there are those films that exist. But these are the only ones that came to mind now, and they're still great for what they do give.
What an incredible list. And you did such an amazing job as well, just explaining what each one is about. Like, you've had me intrigued. Like, I'm literally ready to just straight up after this interview just go and dive deep into these. Like, one of the interesting points as well, like when you mentioned punk attitude, you mentioned like sort of like New York and the history of punk music there. And it sort of made me think of like, how much of an influence does where you come from sort of, have on the music that ends up coming out? Like for you, for example, if you weren't staying, you're in Cape Town, right?
Yes, that's correct.
So if you weren't staying in Cape Town, would you still be making the sort of music that you're making?
I do wonder about that quite a lot. But I definitely believe. Oh, that's a tough question, because I do believe that the context and circumstance of one's life will inform their way of making. But there's another part of me that's like, I don't know, if your heart is the way it is, and I guess you're connected to it, eventually, maybe it'll take a little bit longer, maybe it would happen a bit quicker. But I'd like to believe that you still connect to and find whatever your heart resonates with. So there's a part of me that believes that even if I was living in, I don't know, anywhere else in this country or in another country, that I'd connect to the things that have informed my art. But then again, yeah, no, I do believe that context, I think where I'm at now, has actually been a huge influence. It's a bit of both, the sort of what your heart is naturally attracted to. Like I think regardless of whether I lived here or somewhere else, I'd still love the books that I love and the films that I love and the artists and musicians that I love. But perhaps my home life would have been very different, or my schooling, or the friends or partnerships that I would have made, and that maybe would have, or certainly would have, had an influence on the art I've made, and maybe that would have shifted it somehow.
Well said, Meeks.
One thing I'm really curious about is the month of February. What's so special about February? Because you started Blue Vow in February 2021.
Oh, wow.
You released your debut album in February 2022. And your debut performance was in February 2023. So what is this?
That is so wild.
And I hear that there's an upcoming album in the womb. So
woohoo!
Do I have to wait until February?
I've honestly asked myself that same question. February 2024. That's so interesting. Beautiful connection of dots. But honestly, truth is, it hasn't actually been intentional at all. That's just when, I guess, those doors happen to open up. I mean, I remember when I first had my, like, the first album was initially an EP of 5 songs, and I was like, I didn't really know the whole process of recording, or mixing and producing. I didn't realize how much time it actually takes. And I think I kind of shared them when was it? Like February, March 2021. And I was like, I want them out by April. I want to release them on Iggy Pop's birthday. Like I was very, I was kind of choosing the dates from my head and, not really being conscious of, that these things take time. And it was a really incredible process learning how to record. But for instance, then after that, I was like, sweet, let's release them in June, July. And, life happens and things don't always go according to plan. And then I assumed it would be the end of 2021, which I was also wrong about. And it just so happened that everything happened to fall into place in order for it to be released in February 2022. So for the first album, it was just relinquishing control, I think helped a lot. Obviously still working towards something and not completely letting it go and just being lazy about it, but just being patient and realistic. And with the show, yeah, that is so strange. Even I don't know. I'm pretty blown away by this. I'm not too sure. Maybe it's the stars. But with the show, for instance, that just so happened to be on that date. And I'm so grateful that it fell into place then, because I've been meaning to organize shows, but I was so terrified at making that move. So I'm incredibly grateful that the door kind of presented itself to me, and then I took it. Would have kicked myself if I didn't. But yeah, I'm not. And regarding the third album, I honestly thought by now we would be done recording, but as life goes, we've still got quite a bit more to do. Not too much, but basically just have to record vocals and 2 or 3 instrumental parts. But the second album is quite big. Like it's just, there's a lot more layers. It's written with more of a band in mind, whereas the first album I didn't really write thinking about a band. I was just essentially trying to keep it as small as possible. And it feels really good to sort of release that now. But I don't know. I would love to release the album this year, but there's a part of me that's like, you know what? If it doesn't work out that way, maybe it will be early next year. So I guess we will see. But at least it is something we are working on.
When you say we, is that Dolph, Josh, and Ron?
So they are all a part of the live band. Although Dolph is in so many bands and lives in strands. So I think I'm very grateful to have him play all the drums on the recorded album. I basically demoed and wrote everything on my own at home. So the demo drums would be like a simulator on Logic or GarageBand, whatever program I was using. But then I would bring it, to Ruan and Dolph, and we would shape them together. When I say we, I more mean, so Ruan has been producing and recording the album with me. So it's mostly work that him and I have to do. And fortunately, we've recorded all the instruments. I'm very grateful that he has played some guitar on these songs too. So this album's, even more collaborative than the first. And I think the next one, I would actually love to bring the demos to an entire band and be like, let's work on this together, because my technical abilities are limited, and also my ideas, so I found it incredibly liberating to actually share them with others and see what they add, because collaboration really takes the music to a whole new level. Even just on the first record where Ruan and I were collaborating together, and just ideas that he gave for those initial demos and specifically this album too, it really does help to breathe a whole new life into them. And ultimately it's about the song and it's about the work. It isn't about me or my attachments. And obviously I can, compose and conduct, and, if it doesn't feel right, we won't go in that direction. But to have other minds and hands that one trusts working on, with or on one's art is such an honor. So yeah, by we, it's definitely, I wrote and composed the songs, but I do have, Ruan's helping to produce them, and Dolph is playing the drums, and Joshua is doing so much for the live band. And the second record was essentially all the instruments were pretty much recorded before I took the songs into band form or to live form. So I played most of the bass for that, and it's quite simple. But I definitely think for the next record, it would be an honor to have him on and actually helping to write some of the parts too, because what he did for the live show is also really, really phenomenal.
Now, you releasing music as Blue Vow, was that sort of a nod towards that? Like the fact that you've got other artists that are obviously assisting when it comes to playing live and the recording process. Like basically, why did you make the decision to release music under Blue Vow and not maybe say Chelsea Ann, considering that you do make the music on your own, and then it's a matter of getting, some of the other musicians to help out when it comes to playing live and maybe the recording process?
I at the time I think when I sort of started writing, I was going through I was going through a period in my life where I think I was just feeling very vulnerable and almost wanted to make it as simple and easy and just rely on myself, which was a little bit silly, but it was very useful in a sense that it allowed me to just create and be vulnerable. And then eventually I was like feeling strong enough to share that with the people that I love and felt safe to share it with. Because obviously it was my first time ever doing something like that. But initially I was like, cool, Blue Vows is going to be like a two-piece thing. Keep it as tiny and convenient as possible. Convenience was also another thing, say for tours or shows, it's a lot easier to navigate maybe one or two people rather than a whole band. But, the more I kind of grew and, whether that means grew into my voice as someone who's making music, as well as just into myself, but also grew to trust and allow that to be seen. And it then, really, really hit me that like, whoa, like these songs, they have far more life and body when there's more people involved. Like some of these songs need drums and would be amazing with bass and, all these layers. So I stopped trying to make them small and just allowed them to move and grow in whichever ways that, felt that they needed. And Ruan was also a big part of that because he would suggest like, maybe we should actually put live drums on this instead of a drum machine. So I would say the collaboration definitely helped to make that shift. But yeah, in the beginning, I just wanted to make music and I wanted a sort of, I don't know, for me, Chelsea Ann didn't quite have the same ring as like Patti Smith or Tom Waits, or I don't know, it just felt a bit strange using my name. And I do like the fact that using a bit of an alias, it's sort of, I'm not necessarily creating a character because I think I've realized I actually just want to show up honestly in whatever I do. But I think that there was it felt a bit safer. And as you said, it allows for it to become a whole band. And I like that. I like that it's, even though I'm essentially writing the music, I like that it allows for it to become more of a collaborative space and that dynamic can shift. Whereas I think if it was just me, yeah, I don't know. But then again, it also allows for room if I wanted to have a tiny acoustic show and maybe just play solo. It allows for that too. So I kind of like the fluidity of the name Blue Vow.
So last question just on that aspect. So when you mention fluidity and we're looking at, Blue Vow being sort of that collaboration with those musicians and stuff, are you essentially saying that you could come to Durban and say, for example, have me on drums and say, for example, have Meegs doing maybe backup vocals and such, you'd still be going under Blue Vow, basically. It's not specific to just you and Ruan and some of the other guys that you're doing it with.
Yes, 100%. I mean, I'd be honored and so humbled to have a band that's, like a family and they're there and wanting to grow and move with the project. But also life is such a fluid thing and everyone goes through all these different phases. And I definitely would never want the art to have an attachment to like a person or a thing or a sound. I think the freedom and, as you said, coming to Durban and being like, reaching out to musicians there and allowing it to, obviously still hold the integrity of each song, but then have a completely different air and feel, because every musician will bring a different energy to the music. And I like that. It allows it to be, it allows it to be its own thing and to feel a bit more liberated. And it doesn't necessarily bind people to this thing, obviously, unless they're able to and willing to and want to be there permanently. So it gives things more room, I guess.
I have a question from a friend of Sludge and a big fan of Blue Val, Geronimo. He asks, are you open to collaborations, maybe in the form of a feature or remix?
Absolutely, 100%. I think after initially wanting to try and do this thing alone, and I've just realized the power of collaboration. I think it is so important, just in the same way community is so much more important than sort of always trying to be completely independent. I think that for creative, I'm only going to speak for creative people now, because I don't want to speak on terms of everyone. I do definitely believe solitude is important, but having more minds and bodies and energies working and making art can really open up such a powerful space. And I love it. And I think I'm now not necessarily hungry for it, but a little bit. I'm kind of feeling a little bit more brave to put myself out there and kind of, spend time playing music with people who maybe I've never played music with before, and wanting to kind of expand, because I think it's so important. And I guess in the beginning I was just feeling too vulnerable, but yeah, now that I've sort of grown and made music and taken the first steps, I definitely, I love the thought of collaborating.
He also would like to know, when are you playing again in Cape Town? Do you have any upcoming shows?
I don't, unfortunately, but I am working on it. I basically am actually actually looking for a drummer, or I do have options, but I've sort of shifted focus back to painting. I'm currently working on an exhibition, and I'm trying to juggle two pretty big creative projects. I think I'm still trying to find the balance with that, but I definitely don't want to neglect Blue Val, especially now that we've had our first live show, and I'm really grateful for that experience, and I definitely want to play shows and do more. But no, there hasn't been a date that has been set in stone yet. But when there is one, it will definitely be announced on social media. I just have a few logistical things to work out, and some personal things to work out too, before I can take on that space again. But hopefully it won't be too long before the next show unfolds.
When you speak about finding balance and working on multiple creative projects, is that about segmenting your time across all of them, or maybe focusing on one at a time in phases?
I wish I had the ability to segment time and be like, okay, today I'm going to do 3 hours of painting, 3 hours of music, and then all the other things in between. But I actually don't think I've got the ability to do that, because I find I get quite absorbed or consumed by a creative project I'm working on. So if it is music, then it's like I'm all in, and that's it, and it's wonderful. But then it definitely gets to a point where I'm like, the sort of itch to, or maybe it's a little bit of anxiety, but for the other project, I can almost hear it calling. It's like I gotta get back to it. So it definitely is. I sort of seem to spend like a couple of months in the one, couple of months in the other, and it sort of swings in between the two. And maybe that'll shift. I guess we'll see. A lot of it just has to do with my discipline with time. So yeah, still learning. But yeah, I'm grateful to be able to switch between the two at this current stage.
This is a final question on my end, and it's to sort of try to get a better understanding as to the origins of Blue Val itself. Probably the easiest question as well. Name choice, why Blue Val? Where did that come from? How did you sort of come up with that, and why was it so important for you to be like, this is the name I want to release music under?
um, so the name took quite a while. Actually, the initial name I had for this project was Mud, like MUDD. And this was like super early stages. I think I'd only written about 3 songs, and I was also going through a very, like, I was literally like stuck in the mud with my emotions, and I was so it felt felt pretty accurate. But I then saw on Spotify that it was quite a quite a saturated name, and I was like, oh man, I'll just get lost in the ocean of muds out there. So I, had a lot of time on my hands and really wanted to try come up with something unique, but hopefully something that I don't get sick of. And I had this little piece of paper with me that I would just carry everywhere, and I'd written a whole bunch of words on there that I either liked the sound of or just the energy attached to them. And it was a lot of words. It was probably like, somewhere between like 30 to 50 words. And then I would, join different words together and try and make these things. And for a couple of months in the back of my mind, it was always running. And I would find myself noticing, book covers or street signs or just words out in the world and playing and sort of, I don't know, those ideas were just coming through my mind a lot. And there were, I think, 3 or 4 words that were consistent and sticking out, and blue was one of them. I really like the name Blue just because it doesn't have a gender attached to it. I think the color blue encompasses so much because it's calming, but it can also be very somber. And I find that there's something very spiritual about that color and quite otherworldly. And obviously, it has its connections to nature and water and the sky. And so I find it I just love the word blue. And when it came to vow, I was actually in Joburg with my mom, and we were in the back of a taxi driving back to the airport on our way back to Cape Town after a small weekend or day trip there. And she was obviously very aware that I was, trying to think of ideas, and she was very kind in helping to also share random words or point out things. And while in the back of the car, I looked ahead of me and noticed the car's radio had the word vow sort of written on it. And I just sort of looked up at my mom. I was like, oh, what about blue vow? And something about those 2 words together, it's kind of like when you get an idea and something inside you just clicks or sparks. And I didn't notice or didn't make a sort of conscious noticing of this, but my mom was like, yeah, and the radio itself, the light behind it was blue too. So to me, it felt like this tiny little synchronistic moment. And once Blue Vow had come, I held on to it, but I was still like, okay, but let me just give it a bit more thought. But every time I tried to think of something else, there was like this little inner voice that was like, nope, this is the one, this is what it's got to be. And obviously vow being something like a promise, I found it quite a beautiful attachment to the word blue, and it seemed to fit the music I was making at the time. But it also, I don't think it contains it contains the music to be one thing only. So that's how the name came. And yeah, even when I have gone back and forth with it before, I've sort of questioned it and been like, oh no, do I really like it? Do I not? But now it feels like it is. I feel very content or just at peace with it. And that's a nice feeling.
I feel like you're so great at coming up with names though, because Mud for me is just as incredible as Blue Val. Like, can I literally be that one elitist guy in the back of the room where someone is like, hey, do you know Blue Val? And I'm like, do you mean Mud, bro? Like, honestly,
Come on,
it was Mud. but considering that your mom was there, last question. I know I said last question before, but just from that, your mom was there when the name came together. Does she support your music? Has she enjoyed your journey? Being a musician and such.
Fortunately, wholeheartedly, and I'm really and truly grateful for that. I think to have, specifically someone in one's family, but just someone out there who just recognizes and encourages an endeavor that one wants to take on is it helps. It definitely helps. And she's just been incredibly excited about it, and I'm very, very grateful for that.
Shout out Chelsea's mom.
Woohoo!
All right, epic. Chelsea, thank you so much for having this conversation with us. Thank you for just taking time aside, from your day to spend time with us. Can never appreciate it enough, and we can never thank you enough for that. And just obviously to the listener and anyone who might be wanting to collaborate with you or maybe get in touch with you, what are your social media handles for them?
Okay, well, firstly, it's an absolute pleasure. This was incredibly fun. I love podcasts, so I'm so grateful for the work that you guys are doing, and thank you for having me here. It feels very surreal and incredibly humbling. And thank you for such interesting and thought-provoking questions. As I said earlier, I had no idea what to expect, but I can really see that you both put so much time and care into orchestrating the space. So thank you, and thank you for making it so safe and easy to speak. And yeah, I really appreciate it. And thank you once again for the work that you do. And regarding social media, it's just at blue.vow, BLUE.VOW. And I guess for my personal page where there's photography, and I'll probably start shifting it into a visual art page eventually, it's just chelsea.ann.peter. And that's pretty much it.
All right, epic. Thank you so much for that, Chelsea. And to anyone that's listening to this, thank you for tuning into this amazing episode with Chelsea, aka Blue Vow. Chelsea, we need to close out with a song of yours. So if there is one that you feel like would best represent you and who you are, you can let us know which one it is, and we will close out with that.
That is so kind. I almost it's kind of challenging because because I think I'm just growing and changing, and with that, so it's the art I'm making. So part of me would say like, oh, it's probably one of the newer songs. But if I have to look at my older music to close off on one, I think at the moment, maybe it would be The Rise of Refuge if I have to choose one for today.
Very beautiful, very beautiful. So we're going to be enjoying some Blue Vow, Rise of Refuge. But before we close out, do remember to check out everything Sludge related on our website. It's www.sludgeandandon.com. Don't forget to get some of that merch. It's the best way that you can support the show and keep us going. And it's been a really incredible chat. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'd like to thank Meagan as well for organizing this. Meagan is the brainchild. She was the one who was like, dude, let's get Blue Vow on. And so shout out to her. I cannot end it without that massive shout out. And again, from the three of us, it's been another epic episode. Until next time, enjoy The Rise of Refuge by Blue Vow. It's bye for now.
And a blue rose in blue.